assets, storing assets, and flexibility assets that need to connect. And that's a big transition. So it's redesigning how the whole system works, which is what we're going through right now. All right, I haven't got onto it. Missed a slide there, sorry. Yeah, that's it. So I'm now asking 5 questions. And these questions are, if renewables are cheap, why are bills still high? Can the lights stay on when the sun is down and the wind is low? Why do we need so many pylons, cables, and substations? Why are wind farms sometimes paid to switch off? And will market reform really make energy cheaper for thousands, for households? And so the idea is that by going through these different questions, we'll be able to give you a better sense of what that energy system change is looking like. So the first thing to understand is that on your energy bill at home, it's not just the wholesale price of electricity or gas that you see. You see a whole number of different factors on there. It's how that's transmitted, how it's stored, how the bills work. And so just looking at the price of renewables doesn't translate into what your bill looks like. And so when we're trying to assess if renewables are cheap, why are bills still high, you can see that the cost of solar is lower. It's about just over £60 per megawatt hour. It's onshore wind is just over £72 per megawatt hour. New gas, as you can see, is more than double. That's £147 per megawatt hour. That's what we're purchasing in. And if you also added in nuclear, that's currently about £128 per megawatt hour. And so what we're trying to look at when you look at your bill is you say, okay, you're going to have cheaper renewables being a part of the wholesale price, but you've still got the fact that we're having to invest in network upgrades, the pylons, the substations, the people who manage the bills, the operating costs of those systems. And so your bills will get cheaper, but it will take a time to get to that point. And it's not just dependent on the price of the renewable electricity that you generate. There are a whole number of other things that are part of that system. So can the lights stay on when the sun is down and the wind is low? So what this slide is trying to show you is that we are looking to 2030 to have our electricity system generating about 95% of the electricity from renewables. There'll still be a residual 5%, which will be reliant on gas. But where we were at in 2023 is we're about 60%, and still we've got still a way to get to 2030. But to be able to manage that energy system, you need to have a whole set of building blocks all working together. So when the question is, can the lights stay on? The answer is yes, but it's only if our system is planned properly. So a clean electricity system is not built on one technology. It's doing everything itself. It's built on a portfolio of assets. So it's the generation of the renewables, so your wind, your solar, your nuclear. And it's also around your battery storage. It's about the networks that are efficient and providing stuff to the places that you need. There are interconnectors between us and Europe. So between France, as an example, when we're short on electricity, we can buy in excess from Europe, and vice versa, we can provide when we've got excess. So that's also an important part of that jigsaw. And then you as consumers are also now going to be more practical part of the system, because when there's a generation coming through on renewables, so when it's very sunny, when it's very windy, and we may have excess in one part, you'll be encouraged to turn on your washing machine, turn on your dishwasher. And then when we've got challenges where the demand is higher than the supply, then you're looking at managing some of your goods. So for example, you could turn off your freezer, turn off your fridge for an hour, that won't affect it. So you as householders and participants will be much more active in that energy system. And so reliability comes from bringing these building blocks together and managing them effectively, so that you do have variability from renewables. You know, the sun shines in the summer a lot and during the day, but not overnight. But it's the whole system that manages how you get the reliability. And so it's not just about an issue of when the wind isn't blowing. So the third question is about why do we need so many pylons, cables, and substations? So this is where the physical reality of change is coming home to roost in local communities. And so the old grid, which was built for a world of huge, high volumes of sort of fossil fuels and transmitted in through a transmission network to your homes, isn't the same as having thousands of different assets producing in different places and also organized around a much larger population that we now have. And so what you have to think about is where you're generating and how you're getting it somewhere. So the plumbing of the electricity system is your substations, your transmission networks, your lines, your grid lines, and how you're moving energy from one place to another place. And so how that physical infrastructure comes forward is really important over the next 10 years to allow us to move into a more dependent system on renewables and a cleaner energy system. Okay, next one. So the fourth question is around why are wind farms sometimes paid to switch off? The issue isn't renewables don't work, but it's that we are currently in the process of going through change. And while you're changing that system, things are still being managed. So on this slide, what we're needing to show you is that windy periods in one part of the system don't always work when you're needing supply in another part of the system. So at the moment, there are times when some of our assets are turned off. But what's being done to manage that is that we're looking at more substations, more grid connections, and how we transmit that energy more efficiently and quickly to the places we need it to go to. So the last question I have is about, will market reform really make energy cheaper for households? The key issue here is that market reform is about incentivizing investment into renewables and getting the private sector money forward into our electricity system. And so what we're trying to do here is ensure that through that investment, through better placement and siting of assets, and through greater management of our system, we will get lower bills in the future. So I've just got 2 more slides to go very quickly. So this first one is, what was the economic impact of the April 2025 Iberian blackout? Has anybody got any idea? So that was in Spain last year. 1.6 billion was the estimated cost on a 24-hour period. Second one, sorry, I didn't actually ask you the question on that one. Well, how do I go back? Okay, the second one was £72,000, and this was about how much it cost to switch off a wind farm during the month of June last year. And the last one, 100 billion, this was just how much it cost when Russia invaded Ukraine in October 22 for us in terms of energy price fluctuation changes. So when you look at those costs and prices, and you think about what we're trying to do in terms of investment to our system, just these shocks are bigger than what the investment we're making into our new system and the changes that it's required. Okay, I'm very aware that I've got a red thing just waiting for me. So the last slide is what must be solved nationally, regionally, and locally. So we've got stuff to do at a national level. So we have to ensure that what we're trying to do is that we've got the governance right, that we've set the market rules, the reliability and standards. At a regional level, that we're joining up infrastructure, heat, transport, and networks. They need to be planned across boundaries. And local places, delivery is where you really get stuck in and the change happens physically. So 3 messages. The UK energy debate is now about system design and getting that right. Energy security is about reducing exposure to global fossil fuel shocks. And then the last one I want to just leave you with is that it's getting new system built is going to save us money in the long run. Thank you.
After fashionably late.
Thank
I'm going to share my screen if that's all right. So Distant? Great. So the one consolation I have is that I was at least at a site visit trying to implement exactly what I'm about to talk about. So from an energy resilience perspective, at least I was somewhere doing something relevant. Hi, I'm Tom Cox. I'm the founder and managing director of Decent Energy. So we're on a bit of a mission to try and ensure that the energy everyone uses is as clean and cheap as possible. There are essentially three interlinked problems with energy, and although resilience does fit very firmly within one of these, I think actually there's applicability across the entire piece. So a lack of control in our energy system, so the amount of energy that we're actually importing from abroad, and the amount of gas, and the amount of gas that we've got being imported is significant. About 42% of our grid mix at the moment. So we've got a very poor energy security mix currently. We've also now got about 43%, 12.1 million households in technical fuel poverty. So this is where people are spending more than 10% of their household income on their energy bills. And then finally, we've got mismatched renewable demand and supply. And I think some of that was alluded to in the previous talk. And I think this is the specific part of resiliency and the area that we're primarily focused on. We've got three core products. I promise this won't be too pitchy, but I think the context is helpful for explaining the bit that I'm coming on to next, which is the meat of the thing. But we're doing three things. We're looking at the opportunity to shift energy around to different times of day that are cleaner and cheaper. If folks have got an intelligent tariff, or if they use any of the like free energy Sundays with OVO, this is kind of an automated version of that. And actually, in the previous talk, we were talking about the opportunity to get people to put dishwashers on at particular times of day. We want to go one step further and just put the dishwasher on for you. So that's what effectively Shifter is doing. We've then got a second, the second thing we're building is around flexibility trading. This is then enabling those households to participate in flex trading, which is putting energy on, taking energy off the grid, or lowering generation at specific times of day that would result in a payment to the individual. And then the one that I'm actually here to talk about, and a recent regulatory change that's actually enabled this last piece, is what we call Sharer. So this is peer-to-peer trading, and a key part of energy resiliency is reducing primary energy demand and also reducing transmission loss and being able to manage energy more locally and ensure that folks aren't going to suffer in the case of outages. The Iberian blackout was a perfect example. So ensuring that communities have, first of all, more control over the energy that they generate, but also opportunities to trade it with one another and to build wealth within communities. And each of the products that we're producing address a specific part of the problem. That is going to be the end of my discussion specifically on my company. But I wanted to do this because it's going to lead us on nicely with that last piece about P441. This sounds incredibly boring. What's the P, what's the 441 for, and why does anyone care? So there's a thing called the Balancing and Settlement Code, which is an incredibly dull document. It's about 1,285 pages long, and the PDF is 10.9 megabytes. And this is the consolidated version, just to be clear. This basically sets out the rules for folks trading energy in the UK. Whenever I've been talking to people about what we do as a business, I've always been talking about peer-to-peer and that Sharer product being our North Star. That's where we're headed. That's where we know we're going to make the biggest difference. And up until now, there's effectively been very few ways that's actually practically doable. There's a really interesting company called Energy Local that have managed to do this with an incredible amount of manual effort, getting energy companies to create very specific tariffs for communities. What P441 does is that's effectively enabling us to create networks of devices and community networks without the need to lay new wire. So there's no private wire arrangement. What we're doing is we're creating complex site classes, which sounds incredibly dull, and it's effectively getting all of the smart meters for a group of folks that agree to trade energy with one another and net meter off against one another and bundle them all together so that they're treated effectively as a single supply. So you might be asking, why do I care about that? The really specific use case that this is great for is for Fulton Primary School. I've disguised the name for privacy reasons. I'm pretty sure the headmistress would be absolutely fine me talking about this, but a perfect example is schools who are getting solar installed on their roofs. What happens, especially if the school has grown over a number of years, as almost every single village in Cambridgeshire has, they will build a new building. The new building may have a new grid connection. The new grid connection will not be connected to the building that they installed the 25 kilowatts of solar panels on. The issue this creates is that although they've got an agreement with the grid to import 22 pence, import energy at 22 pence per kilowatt hour and to export 5 pence, when they build their new building, they are only given exactly the same deal. This effectively means that every kilowatt that they export from meter 1, when it comes to the next building next door, they're then charged the same 22 pence to import it again. So there's a massive loss for every kilowatt generated, creating really significant disincentives for schools to go and install solar, and also for municipal buildings. And Melinda very kindly put together another session for us to go and talk to some folks about specifically this, working with schools and local communities to try and identify opportunities to create these networks. The way that this problem is specifically solved is if we can bundle those 2 meters together, we effectively eliminate that trade. So we no longer get paid the 5 pence to export and pay the 22 pence to import. We now just have effectively a single supply and a single connection with an energy supplier, which then enables us to effectively net meter off. Now, this is the specific use case that this was created for. The reason it is particularly interesting to peer-to-peer energy trading is there's nothing to stop us doing this in local communities with individual households. So we could join, you could get you and your neighbour, who, if you've got some solar and they have an EV charger, you could create a small P441 network, and whenever you're overproducing solar, our platform could automatically turn your neighbour's EV charger on to ensure that they're charging the EV. We exist solely in the software layer, so we're controlling the relationships between devices. We're setting EV chargers to charge, batteries to charge, dishwashers to come on. And what the P441 network enables us to do is to completely change the way that those customers are billed for that energy, so that instead of everyone having their own individual supply license, you now have this ability to in effect trade. The reason for the air quotes is this isn't quite it. It's a great step in the right direction. It's a huge enabler for community energy. But the real challenge is, let's say all the people on your street decide to build an energy community, all 20 houses in a row would need to agree to be bundled together in a single supply license, go and negotiate a single tariff with an energy supplier, and then effectively agree which proportion of the bill each of you would pay at the end of each month, which would probably be a little bit complicated for most people. Where it does present a really fascinating opportunity, though, is for organisations like schools, organisations like councils and municipal buildings, and anyone that has a single supply across the distributed site within and this is key, within a specific substation. Substations can span kind of a few square miles depending on where it is that you're specifically located. So there's a real opportunity here to link these two things together. And that's, yeah, sorry, the big reveal was that there's P441 now at the bottom of the of the slide, but remove the animations because it's getting on my nerves having to flick through all of them earlier. But yeah, this is the very first example that we've got of linking businesses, individual households into effectively community energy networks. It's, as I say, not the absolute be all and end all, but it definitely is a step in the right direction. I know this is a talk specifically about resilience within Cambridgeshire, but also these tools, these things that we're doing, even the things that the grid are doing, are really key. We've got a very developed grid, but actually all of the stuff that we're learning here has massive applicability globally for areas of the world that have much less developed grids. And there's a handful of use cases that we've identified that would really help kind of drive some of this forward. A key one, and probably my favorite, is There's going to be a massive opportunity, and it's always nice to have a bit of hope at the end of this. For Ukraine at the end of the war, over a third of their households now have gone and installed backup power in the form of a plug-in battery. Right now, that's providing essential power when the grid goes out so that they can carry on working and keep themselves warm. After the war, after Ukraine's rebuilt, they will have one of the most stable grids in the world. And then suddenly they've got a massive amount of battery storage that they can leverage to reduce carbon, to reduce cost, to do grid balancing. So yeah, there's a really nice story in there someday. Cool. That is the end of my, not quite TED talk, but yeah. So in summary, I think this is the really key thing. These kinds of changes that are being made by Ofgem, that are being made by Elexon, that really open up opportunities for us to do peer-to-peer trading. Whenever something like this is published, there's always a big call to go and rally support, because even now P441 is not actually been approved. It will be approved in about 5 days' time, I believe. We're very confident this one will be approved because Ofgem is so passionate about it and actually have worked really hard with the folks that are submitting it. But the thing that we have to be really cognizant of is that this is not the best thing for energy companies. Folks, that if we now have the ability to network these devices together, it's very likely that we're going to end up in a situation where energy companies are going to start to make a significant loss where they used to make a significant profit. So it's not really in their best interest to be driving this stuff forward. So we need community energy schemes. We need people who are passionate about this. We need people with these devices to sign up to services like ours, so that we can work out ways that we can make energy cheaper and cleaner for everyone. Sorry again for the lateness.
Good evening. I'm Paul Kershaw. I'm here to represent Cambridge Retrofit Hub. And if you will excuse me, I'm just going to sort through my own tech problems whilst I get my slideshow prepared. No. Sorry, I didn't have permission. So,
I might be able to, if you have the slides, might be able to share them.
yeah. Now, I was here on time, but I wasn't so well prepared, it would seem.
I'm downloading it now, so if I don't get it, use my mission.
I'm just rejoining the meeting.
Um,
Hooray, at last. I do apologise for that. Like I say, I was here early and I guess I assumed everything would work. So we've heard about some of the energy crises that we're currently facing. One of those crises for the UK is currently the spark gap, which is affecting us, which is the difference in the price between gas and electricity. The low price of gas means that our electricity is about between kind of 3 and 5 times the price, depending on where you are regionally in the UK. But that makes it difficult to transfer over to electric because of the efficiency that you need to obtain in order for things to be economical. We've had energy crises from the Ukraine and now with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. We've got the UK grid connectivity crisis where it could take up to 10 years for new renewable energy systems to be connected to the grid. Sorry, we've lost picture again. Oh, yeah, that's right.
That one, One forward.
Yes. So the worst situation with all these energy crises is to be in fuel poverty. And unfortunately, that does affect at least 9% of households actually here in Cambridge. And what happens when we face we could. Okay, so as I mentioned, 9% of houses in the UK are facing fuel poverty. And that is defined by measuring the household income, energy prices, and home energy efficiency to come up with the number of houses in that situation. There are a couple of different equations for that. The government has their measure, which puts about 3.17 million households in the UK in fuel poverty. And the National Energy Action equation puts about 6 million households in fuel poverty. Okay, and what is the effect of being in fuel poverty? One of the first things you'll tend to do is try and cut down on your electricity usage. That would be turning off the extraction fans that will be taking out all of the warmth in your house. And you'll want to stop drafts again to stop the heat from escaping. And the issue with that is that you'll then be increasing the humidity within your house. And with that, when you're going above the kind of 40 to 60 healthy range of humidity in your house, that's when you get incidences of mold and fungi. And the other step is just waiting for the slide to catch up. Yep, another effect is that you would next turn down or off the heating again in order to save money. And the government has guidelines on temperatures which houses should be heated to. Generally, that's a minimum of 18 degrees, but that should be higher when you have small children or the elderly or vulnerable. When you're getting under 16 degrees, that's when you're getting issues for health. And with people living in a building with a temperature under 16 degrees, with the amount of moisture that they're introducing to the building, you can then end up with issues for the building itself. So what can we do? We can optimize our heating. Gas especially can be optimized to run more efficiently. Generally, gas burners are very poorly installed in the UK. And also with heating, we can prevent overheating in the summer. We can use insulation to slow heat from entering or escaping from your house. With ventilation, the object is to try and control the airflow in your home, not to completely make it airtight, but to take control over how the air enters and leaves your building. And energy efficiency, trying to run your house as energy efficiently as possible by things such as switching to renewable heating, solar and batteries. And one of the first things you can do is to check that you're on the right tariff. But it's a very confusing situation with Octopus Energy, one of the leading providers, well, they're now the largest provider, but also a game changer. They have got a myriad of different tariffs, which are all rather confusing. So how am I supposed to make sense of it all? Fortunately, here in Cambridge, we have a number of options available to us, sources of information. We've got Open Eco Homes, which has been running for 15 years now. Every season, they have a number of properties which are open to visit, and they can show you about efficiency measures that they've introduced into their homes. As you can see, there's a picture of somebody particularly ugly sitting there next to his rather efficient car charger. And we also have the Transition Cambridge Energy Group, which is always very hot on the topics around energy efficiency and energy itself. Recent talks include discussions about community energy projects. And also there's a series of talks going on at the moment about zero bills. I myself, fortunately, through the use of vehicle to grid and vehicle to home technology, I've been fortunate enough to have 0 to negative energy bills for the last 6 to 7 years. So that's a very hot topic. Those two organisations and others in Cambridge have led to the formation of the Cambridge Retrofit Hub, a not-for-profit retrofit and home energy advice training hub. Originally, it was set up with funds from the Quakers, and more recently, we've been attracting funds for projects from Cambridge City and South Cambridge Council. We have two main areas of operations. We have the able to pay retrofit market, which includes homeowners, landlords, community buildings, schools. We have we're also going to be looking into community energy schemes with Tom, introducing those widely. We run presentations to communities and also to local businesses in the city to talk about retrofit and other energy efficiency topics. And we run a series of training workshops for DIYers and for tradespeople. In the image there, you can see a rig that we've made for practicing the skills of airtightness taping. And we also run thermal imaging training at that airtightness workshop. Also, we assist with Cambridge Carbon Footprint on running their online thermal imaging training. We've also developed an in-window fan, which assists with implementing airtightness measures if you're going through the DIY retrofit route, or you want your builder to get very good airtightness, then being able to check the work that's being done regularly through an airtightness fan is very useful. Hiring one in can cost you hundreds of pounds. So we run a program where you can build your own fan for use yourself or for your builder to use, which will save lots of money in the long run. The other side of our operations is the Home Energy Advice Network, where we can, through an arrangement with the Centre for Energy Equality, we can run home visits and public events. We run drop-in cafes, the Cambridge Room Repair Your Life Cafe as a home energy advice pop-up stall, first Saturday of every month in the Grafton Centre. And also we are partnering this year with the Cambridge Festival to showcase the film Power Station, which is about a community in Walthamstow in London who have joined together to try and get as much as their street on the PV installation network. There are posters for that either side of the entrance as you come in with the details of the date it's being shown in Cambridge and how to arrange tickets for that. And we also have a stand outside this afternoon. You're welcome to come and ask us any questions after we've finished. And I still have a green marker. So I have raced through those slides. I do apologise for that, but I believe we'll be doing a Q&A shortly. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Tom, for sorting that.
Sheryl, Paul and Tom, fantastic presentations. I've certainly learned a lot. I'm going to see if the councillors want to make comments or ask questions now, and then we'll go to an open Q&A. First, Richard, would you like to ask anything or say anything?
Yes, thanks, Katie. Yeah, once again, this is the fourth forum that we've been to, and very, very interesting, completely different to the sustainability and the other ones, flooding, for example, but just as interesting. I knew even less about this than I did for the other three. So Sheryl, first of all, for you, yeah, I learned a lot about that. But for example, you said how oil and gas is a third of our energy dependency, and renewables are now just about 50%, which is fantastic. And you said about how the future is pluralistic and local generation transition is where we are at the moment. So that was very interesting. I was interested about the pylons, and you were saying about how pylons are part of the one of the oil points. Do you ever envisage a time when pylons can be dismantled? Because it's seeing these things actually scarring the landscape. It'd be really amazing if the future means that we can eventually get rid of them if it's all locally produced and locally consumed. And then with Tom, the decent energy CEO and all of that, that was very interesting. I found you were speaking so quickly, I found it quite difficult to keep up. It was one of the difficulties with all of this today's set of talks is that it can seem quite abstract about energy and tariffs and invisible ways of regulating and tapping into and sourcing and costing all of these things when it's sort of something like electricity that you don't see unless you're using it. The P441, I wasn't quite sure about that, but I was wondering about communications, trying to get a communications to make all of what you were saying more understandable for ordinary people like myself, for example. Maybe with sort of graphics, more user-friendly graphics to actually visualize more effectively what you're saying about. And I was interested also about whether you're directly involved in third world fuel poverty areas, if there's any examples you'd say. I think you mentioned Ukraine, but maybe there's some other ones you could tell us about. And then finally, Paul, the heating, insulation, ventilation. One of the things that I was a little bit concerned about is the external insulation of houses. There's a lot of external insulation with the sort of what looks like polystyrene. When I've talked to the people actually drilling holes into the bricks, it looks as if it completely destroys the integrity of the brick wall to actually attach something that looks very, very flimsy and not won't last another 100 years. And I was wondering about the airtightness fan and how that actually avoids a major problem in some of our housing stock, city council housing stock, which is mould. And if you could just explain to the layman about how airtightness fans actually allow air circulation while actually making it airtight. Those are my three questions. Thank you very much.
So I think the first question for me was, are we going to get rid of our pylons? So certainly between now and 2050, the idea is that we're going to increase the volumes of electricity that we require as we move from transport, which is predominantly using diesel and aviation fuel, on freight using diesel and petrol, to shift that level of consumption of oil effectively onto the electricity system means that you're going to have to substantially increase the amount of electricity that you need to generate and move around the system. So that's just transport. If you're also talking around gas, and so domestic gas for homes, heating homes, but also for industrial buildings, that's going to be moving so that you shift from gas onto electricity. So again, there's another uptick of electricity use. So certainly between now and 2050 and beyond, I don't see that you're reducing the numbers of pylons that we're going to have. Whether you reduce what they look like, whether they change in terms of being more beautiful, or whether you look to move electricity transmission to underground transmission, which is very expensive, then no is the answer. I don't see that that's going to change. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so I'll take these in order. And actually, I was an IT consultant for a number of years, so my primary method of communication is through slide decks, unfortunately. So I apologise in advance.
Yeah, sorry.
I actually have one additional slide that I think might help bring it to life a little bit more. So, the willing more tech was the solution. This is all just suspense building. So yeah, I was umming and ahhing about the best way to present this, and I wanted to really shy away from the kind of standard pitch deck stuff. So I tried to condense a lot of what we do in at the start, and I think I probably just explained it quite poorly. But the best way of explaining what we're actually trying to do is through the concept of a customer. So this is Lynn's, and Lynn's, like Paul, installed an EV charger, not bi-directional, but an EV charger. She's got solar panels and she's got a heat pump. So she's done all of the electrification things that you think are the right things to do. But one of the big challenges is she's installed all this kit, but none of it works together and it doesn't work as it should. So the EV charger, if anyone's on the Intelligent Octopus Go tariff, it's excellent for EV adoption, but we've actually accidentally created what I call the pink peak for no branding reason at all. But there's now a period overnight where energy systems catapult modeled, and there's a really sharp climb in energy demand, a brand new peak where there didn't used to be one, which is causing us to need to bring online more thermal plants when we weren't anticipating needing to at all, and contributing towards less renewables being utilised to charge EVs, because we're charging them in the middle of the night when none of that energy is available. If you shift enough into a specific point, you're actually going to make the problem much worse. The solar panels that she's got installed for 4 months of the year basically don't do anything and sit in the loft. And then the heat pump is actually costing her more to run than the boiler did for a lot of the reasons that Paul said. This has nothing to do with heat pumps. Heat pumps work. On the record, entire Scandinavia knows that heat pumps work. The challenge is that the marginal pricing, which is the spark gap that Paul was alluding to, and also the way that we're using energy. So we're pricing energy into static tariffs where people pay exactly the same price over the course of the day, not taking into account the fact that the carbon intensity and cost of the grid actually changes over the day. So if we adopt more intelligent ways of using these devices, then that can really significantly contribute. And yeah, we're kind of the glue that sits between those things to try and make, first of all those devices work together nicely, and then second of all, look for opportunities within communities to go, right, okay, can we, if your neighbour's overproducing solar, can we switch an EV charger on? Can we heat your hot water? Because a hot water tank is basically just a big thermal battery. So that's maybe a bit clearer of what it is that we're aiming at. And then your second question. Fuel Puppy in Africa, sorry. Yeah, so one of our investors is actually a Ukrainian software development firm. I've been to Ukraine during the war several times and I've seen people who have bought these plug-in batteries, and plug-in batteries are an amazing device because you've effectively got a small amount of backup. That means that you can carry on working, you can stay relatively warm, you can keep doing all the things you would normally be doing without the need for an electrician to come to your house and install a battery and modify your consumer unit. It literally plugs into the wall. There's a startup in Cambridge that's in the process of releasing these at the moment. And if anyone bought a new build with solar on, they're definitely worth looking into. They're called Node Energy. But the fuel poverty and challenges in Ukraine is one thing. We're also working with a company called OVI, so it's a children's hospital in an area called Magori in over by Lake Victoria in Kenya. The really interesting thing in a lot of the sub-Saharan African markets, both in West Africa and East Africa, is the fact that people are using diesel generators to supplement the availability issues on the grid. This can be as bad as kind of like 40% availability over the course of the year in some of these more rural areas. So Kenya have actually made an incredibly green grid. It's amazing. It's like 94% renewable when it works. And that's one of the big challenges for folks in these places. So we're helping them predict when they're going to have power outages by looking at the frequency and the duration of power outages and building a predictive model to go, right, we think you need this amount of backup power, which then means that organizations like OVI can spend much less on CapEx to buy a battery to ensure that they've got as much backup power as they need, because they actually know how much time they're going to spend offline over the course of the year. And as the grid becomes more secure and more developed, again, that presents an opportunity because we now have a battery to do things like peak shaving, which is when there are big spikes in the grid, they could export the battery to help balance the load. And also with grid forming inverters, so we can also almost make a tiny grid in a local area. We can keep local people online. And this is especially important in areas like rural Kenya, where, okay, the hospital can afford a battery because it's a well-funded primarily through external funding. But the individual people who live in that town or village have no such ability to go and purchase one of these devices. So if we can export back to a small area and keep more people online, especially those people who can't afford to adopt these technologies themselves, we start to solve problems for a lot more people.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Your two questions have hit on the two kind of basic building blocks for retrofit, which are insulation and ventilation. If you get either of those wrong, you get problems, as we've seen recently with a lot of news reports about 95% of insulation in various projects failing. That's a problem because they didn't approach the ventilation side of things as well. You mentioned about external wall insulation being applied, and it might affect the front of the face of the building. There's external wall insulation, but there's also internal wall insulation. A very good example is the Entopia building here in Cambridge, the old BT telephone exchange next to the University Arms, which has been very sympathetically retrofitted to an exceedingly high standard. So that is things that can be taken in mind when you're designing a retrofit. For my property, I used external wall insulation and I used cork for its natural properties. And at the end of that life, it can be recycled and kind of reused, but it will then require something to be put in its place. But that's what we would want to do anyway, because it provides the insulation for the building. The problems with mold occur when you're not controlling the ventilation, and the air tightness fan is to help you to discover where the unwanted ventilation is in the building, the cracks, the holes, where all of the unwanted breezes can get in and out. So you can then plug those holes, and then you're implementing a ventilation system such as mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, where you're in control of the ventilation and making it do what you want it to do. So you're controlling the humidity levels and ensuring a fresh supply of air into the building so that you're going to stop any mold or damp problems from occurring. Hopefully that.
Thank you very much. Tim, do you want to make a comment? I think we want to make sure that everybody has opportunity.
I'm just going to make comments. I don't think ask any questions, but you feel free to respond anyway. So thank you to all the speakers. I've learned a huge amount tonight, and it's been very interesting. I'm a computer scientist by trade, so I'm kind of attracted to the nerd factor here of all the technical stuff. I'm even inspired to read the P44-1 document. But anyway, what I thought was interesting is this tension between the centrally controlled power companies, their interests, and let's say consumers' interests in decentralizing that system. I think that the tension there is very interesting. And it reminds me of in the 90s, I worked at Bell Laboratories, which was owned by AT&T. And that during the 90s, it was becoming increasingly clear that AT&T's centralized communication system was under threat by this weird thing called the internet, and which was a decentralization of communications, right? The technology of the internet is a decentralized technology. And so that tension there actually, led to this huge boom of the internet. It destroyed a lot of the old telco companies. Really changed the world. So maybe we'll see that kind of thing happen here as well. I think it's unfortunate that the power companies were privatized. I mean, it would be a lot easier if they weren't, I think. But that's another story, isn't it? Anyway, so there is that parallel to look at, in the communication revolution. I think there may be some other parallels there that are worth talking about. Finally, I just want to say that everything you talked about today has to do with education, educating people about the options, educating people about the technologies, where this transition of the system itself is very interesting, I think, and people probably don't understand that. And being on the planning committee, I see that, yes, we need to know about this kind of thing, and we need to educate the residents about it. So that some of these infrastructure projects, which are often unpopular, we have to be able to convince people that maybe they're worthwhile. So those are my comments. I don't really have any questions.
Yeah, the parallels between telco and energy are drawn kind of all the time. I think there's definitely a lot of similarities in the big telco boom and now the big decentralized energy transition, but also in the just electrification journey generally. I think the big advantage we've got is that the grid's already there, whereas you had to go buy spectrum from governments to set up the telecommunication companies, and at that point you had effectively a monopoly on a wireless network, whereas a lot of the national grid is still nationalized. Energy companies are a challenge. DNOs broadly work all right, actually. It's one of those weird things which actually is a privatized monopoly that seem to function reasonably well. But yeah, the energy company piece is a particular problem. But yeah, I think it is solved in some part by the fact that it is already there. People can already participate in it. It's a relatively, in air quotes, kind of open system. So yeah, I think that's our main advantage.
Let me just comment that remember the original internet was over telephone lines, not wireless or anything like that. It wasn't using the radio spectrum. It was just over using modems.
Yeah, I was talking about the wireless telco industry specifically. Again, the landline telecoms industry was actually, again, reasonably well competed in. There's a huge amount of landline phone providers that managed to shoot up because we had a nationalized grid of phone network already.
And I think you made a really good point about planning. Locally, you have something called local area energy plans, which are effectively identifying what you need over the next 20 years in terms of infrastructure. And it's ensuring you then plan for that in your local plans, but also that there is this relationship between what you planning locally for local energy infrastructure, but also what's coming down from national infrastructure that's going to need to come and sit somewhere in your patch potentially. and ensuring that those communities that then host that infrastructure, that they also get some benefits. And this is the sharing of value, because if you have a substation next to you, that's providing for a lot of electricity use across the patch. And so how do you then get a lower bill potentially, or a tariff benefit? So it's important that we understand how that all fits together.
Thank you. Karen Young, do you want to say something or ask?
Yes, well, I'll ask one question and someone can decide to answer. Maybe you've partially answered it already. And actually, before I say it, just thank you again for all the talk. It's been really interesting. But what do you think that the council should be doing to help with all of this?
I'm pointing at you because I think the council should be working at getting in some community energy projects wherever possible. The benefits for those are going to be widespread in terms of the kind of community buildings that the council owns, the schools, hospital, all of those buildings on large campuses will all benefit from that technology and can really quite changing.
I agree, using your own assets in some ways to facilitate this new type of technology is one way you can do it. But if you're the local planning authority, you've got your planning powers as well, and you need to use that. But then also, as an organisation, you'll have your energy bills, and you need to work out how you want to connect your different businesses, your different assets in under some form of collective network, and then get better priced bills for your organisation. So you've got three bits. It's your procurement and your powers there. You've got your policy powers, and then you've got your assets.
Do you want to come in and then we'll go?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think one of the things is one of the things that the council is already doing, which is retrofitting some of this stuff into council and social housing particularly. Everyone thinks the heat pump's more expensive to run, but as I say, it's more about when you're using the heat pump and how hot it's running at particular times of day. We're a great example. So we installed a heat pump and in 2024, we paid an average of 17 pence per kilowatt hour for our electricity with a relatively small battery. I intentionally don't have big shiny kit because I want to be able to kind of simulate the stuff that people would regularly be installing in their own home. So even if you just install a battery into social housing, especially social housing that is electrically heated already, we save around 35% of our electricity bill annually. That would pay back in under 4 years for most properties. And at that point, it's just making energy cheaper and ensuring that those homes are more able to afford bills. It's also excellent because if you're making the energy cheaper, to Paul's point earlier, you're enabling people to heat their homes adequately, which is then ensuring they've got warmer, drier homes, and is actually going to reduce your budget for having to maintain those properties going forwards. You've got less mold problems, you've got less damp problems. So there's some very real things we can do immediately, not even using systems like the one that we're developing. We get an order of magnitude more return, but just using regular time of use tariffs can make a huge change to the cost of energy for residents.
Thank you. We need to go to the open Q&A. Do you want to
I thought maybe you would make a comment about our the city council's heat network project.
I think Sheryl knows a lot about it. I think we'll go to the open Q&A, and then towards the end we can say a bit about the heat network. So I'm going to hand over to Charlie because it's collecting questions.
Yes, thanks so much. Please do, my opportunity might come up to talk about it. So thank you, really appreciate it. We have quite a lot of questions, and I do apologise for anyone who doesn't get their question answered. We had a peak of about 25 people online, but we've got probably about the same in the room, but people have dropped off the line, so I'll probably prioritise people in the room to start. That's usually the way I've been doing it. I'm just going to quickly run through some information here. So just raise your hand if you're in the room and you'd like to speak, and I will probably go 2 at a time. Please make sure you turn your microphone so that people can see online and get on recording. If you don't have a mic, but you'd like to ask a question or you don't feel comfortable, just come and talk to me and talk in my ear and I shall ask the question for you. For those online, no one has asked to say it themselves, so I will speak for them. But of course, if online you do want to say it yourself, just put it in the chat and you'll be able to unmute when I call you. Where possible, please try to address your questions to a specific speaker and keep them focused on the issues being raised, not the politics. It's meant to be a helpful space rather than a political one. With that, we will start with 2 questions in the room, and I saw 2 hands shoot up. So we will go for those. So we'll come to you first, and then we'll come to you.
Tom, does your magic mean that we can aspire to Sizewell C becoming redundant?
When are they planning on finishing it now? I mean, yeah, I think by the time it's done, we might be long dead anyway. So not necessarily Sizewell C. Nuclear is probably one of the last things I'd want to switch off, but it does definitely mean that we can reduce the amount of thermal fossil power plants that we're using at the moment, which I think should definitely be the priority, and to transition those more to kind of peak shaving and peaker style services rather than just being constant baseload. I think at the moment 5% still of our national energy demand is met by biomass burning, which is way too high. It is incredibly important, however, and even if you look at the Green Party's manifesto a few years ago, not the latest one, they were talking about biomass still being part of the energy mix and being necessary. I think the challenge with nuclear is the challenge that we're seeing exactly now. It takes an incredibly long time to build it. But yeah, it is clean energy from my perspective. So it's an important part of the mix.
Wonderful, thank you. And to the speaker.
I don't understand this P4 for one thing, what you've said, but it does sound it's quite similar in functionality to SoulShare for Manual Energy. And I wondered if you think your system, the P4 one is better in some way. I mean, I'm interested in a comparison. SoulShare, well, I think was developed primarily so that people living in apartment buildings can have their own panels and peer-to-peer share across the whole building in a fair way. So it's all about the algorithms for parceling out the pricing, really. At least I think it is. Do you know all about this, don't you? Because it must be competitive, surely.
So I mean, we're not by any means the only people that are going to be doing stuff with P441, and it's certainly not our thing. It's but it's something that we plan on leveraging. SoulShare is brilliant. Actually, I saw it come out a few years ago, and it was really exciting, and actually presented an opportunity for shared solar within apartment blocks, which I think was a solution that was desperately needed, and individually metering each of the properties based on their consumption. I don't want to say it completely replaces it, but I think it goes an incredibly long way to replace something like SoulShare, because effectively what you have is a net metered internally within the apartment block amount of energy. So energy is being generated on the roof, likely through a single grid connection. And actually, if all of your individual households join that network, they're all consuming an amount of the energy that's being generated from the solar panels on the roof. The complexity is the same complexity, however, that SoulShare is seeking to solve, which is then how do you apportion the energy specifically between those apartment buildings? But it becomes a data problem, not a physical infrastructure problem, which I think is where the real shift is. And for me, I think that's the really exciting thing, is that we don't have an additional cost for apartments to move to solar and renewables. We've now got a data opportunity utilizing the smart meter network that's already there to enable to do that at real scale really quickly. It's yeah, I think it's going to be a massive boom for apartment buildings and those kinds of community living spaces.
So which one is the data only, the SoulShare or the P441?
So they're both solving that problem,
Yeah.
But the data only solution is what P441 enables. So as I always use the P, which is really frustrating because it's almost like using acronyms and then nobody knows what I mean, but it's nice shorthand because the creation of complex site classes makes less sense to everyone anyway. But yeah, you're effectively, if you bundle all of the meters together, you create a network internally. The grid only sees 1 meter. So all of the energy that's generated from the solar panels is then consumed by everyone in the building before any of it is in essence exported back to the grid. And so it really does solve that problem in a fairly neat way.
Wonderful, thank you very much. We'll now go to 2 questions online. I'll be reading these out. We're going to go for a question from Gareth, and we'll go to a question from Nicole. You might want to just prep for this one. It's a bit of a long question, but it is a valuable one. So, have the panel considered the material footprint of renewable energy technologies, particularly in terms of copper and rare earth metals? What's their impact on nature in terms of mining and land use, for example, habitat loss? Who controls access to these minerals, and whether there are enough minerals in the ground for the scale of the transition that's required while maintaining economic growth? And what do those aspects mean for our resilience? It's quite a long question, but a valuable one. And there's a related question here, which I think summarizes it quite well as well, is how do we ensure no one is left behind in the just transition or in the transition?
Yeah, so on the materials and rare earth metals piece specifically, I think the real need is to work out how we can introduce more circularity into the mix. So there's already an awful lot of lithium-ion batteries out there right now, and I think one of the key challenges there is recycling. So at the moment, there's a very large bus company that pays people to take away their lithium-ion batteries and dispose of them, which seems insane. They do get recycled, and actually there's a myth going around that lithium-ion batteries don't get recycled. If something has a value as high as a lithium-ion battery, it is going to get recycled. Someone's going to use that again. And there's a big opportunity there as well to make more of those batteries whilst we have them. So after they go in the bus, then the transition logically should be to stationary storage. And after they've lived out their useful life in stationary storage, then only should we look to move to recycling. So I think one part of the problem is let's keep using the stuff we've already got. And then another one is looking at alternative technologies that are not as impactful, don't impact the environment or specific countries as negatively. So one common criticism of lithium-ion batteries specifically is the need for nickel and cobalt, which is generally mined from the DRC, from Congo, in probably about the worst possible conditions you could think of for mineral extraction. The good news, however, is that there are innovations going on in that space. We've got, there's actually another startup in Cambridge that are building a sodium-ion battery called 11, significantly less environmental and social impact than the need for cobalt for lithium-ion batteries. So we've got a climate crisis that needs solving now. So I think we absolutely need to continue to use some of the rare earth metals, some of the rare earth minerals that we would rather not be right now. But at the same time, we need to be transitioning as quickly as we possibly can to things that are less impactful, have more circularity. That was only one of the questions.
I think there was, I mean, I just want to build on what Tom was saying there in terms of research that's going on in our range of universities. I think battery technology and reducing the reliance on some of those heavy metals and precious metals is really important. Sorry, thank you. So there's a lot of research around new battery technology and sort of weaning us off some of those precious metals. I think there was also a question around the just transition, which was about helping those who need more support. And certainly I think the governments, and I'm sure Cambridge City will want to have a word on here, their incentives and their programmes and investments tend to come down through some of the social housing to support the retrofit programmes and how they're working to support the able to pay. So there's that differentiation between those that are able to pay, who can take advantage of Tom's technologies, who can have their solar panels, their batteries and their capital investment up front, the able to pay market, who are now able to manage their bills better than others because they haven't got the technologies. So on the government side, they're needing to put money into significant programs to support social housing, getting those retrofitted, taking you off expensive electrical heating, putting in heat pumps or heat batteries. And that's one of the mechanisms that's coming through on that just transition. The other thing that's being looked at is a whole number of financial mechanisms. So how do you put cheap loans in for people to borrow to upgrade their homes? Whether it's low cost loans, and how do you do that at scale?
So yes, on the kind of carbon footprint question, there's a lot of stories in the press about the cost of the net zero transition being £7.2 trillion. What these press articles don't generally point out is that the cost of not doing the net zero transition will be far higher and will not have as a great benefit to the country. There are often also stories, and we've mentioned cobalt here. A lot of the EV manufacturers have stopped using cobalt in the manufacture of their EV batteries. We've seen the technologies that have develop exponentially over the last few years, so that now EVs aren't using cobalt, but cobalt is still used for the lithium batteries for our mobile phones, laptops. We were mining cobalt before EVs turned up, and we will unfortunately probably still continue to mine it in the same way. That's more kind of an issue I see of the mining industry. The amount of cobalt that we get from the DRC is just a fraction of the cobalt that is mined. I think the majority of it is mined in Australia and somewhere in South America. So these are kind of red herrings that are being thrown our way by the billionaire press in a way. And on the question of trying to ensure that no one's left behind, unfortunately, people will be. That's just life, unfortunately. It's always been that way. The Cambridge Retrofit Hub was set up with a dual purpose, specifically to address that as a not-for-profit community benefit society. We're there to provide information and to try and spread education as far and wide as we can to assist people who aren't in that able to pay market. So it's very much a core tenet of our society.
Wonderful, thank you very much. A good example, I think, of one of our earlier topics around reuse in the circular economy. There. We will now come to questions in the room, another few questions in the room, get some hands up. Come to you, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. I'm Miller from Carbon Neutral Cambridge. I'm interested in what we can do in Cambridge, which of course is an innovative and wonderful place, to make sure that we actually have a secure, low carbon power supply as soon as we possibly can. And it seems to me that one of the keys is well, obviously generation as power grid, but also storage is key. But increasingly, we've got enormous numbers of high quality batteries sitting there parked along the side of the roads. So what could we do individually or locally to encourage vehicle to grid systems to become widespread? And for those that don't know, this is where your car could actually charge your supply the power for your home, which seems to be bizarrely restricted by some car manufacturers. I'm looking quite strongly at Paul here because I think you've actually installed it.
Yes, I can take charge on this question. I've been involved as a participant on vehicle to grid trials for the past 7 years, and I applied. It became kind of a publicly available to join, and I applied something like 8 years ago. So this has been going on for years. The technology, as far as I can tell, was proven within the first couple of years. And it's so frustrating that it isn't available. The initial restriction was that it was limited to one car manufacturer because they built the bidirectional charging facility into the car. So the initial trials were restricted to the Nissan Leaf and their ENV van. We are seeing some more EV manufacturers start to include bidirectional technology in their vehicles, but there are many different parties that have to come together. You've got the vehicle manufacturers, you've got the charger manufacturers, you've got the energy companies, you've got the district network operators. All of these people have to come together to decide rules and safety stipulations and various things. The technology works, it should be available. There are talks of it becoming publicly available this year. A number of bidirectional chargers have been touted and advertised, but sadly, a number of them have now been removed from the market, just disappeared from the news. So it is a fantastic technology that the millions of vehicles that are here in the UK, if we could get all of them connected up to the grid, they would provide massive facility to balance the highs and lows of the grid demand. In fact, the national grid in its future projections has factored in vehicle to grid technology a lot into its future predictions, but it's just frustrating that we're having to wait so long for the technology to come about.
And to the next question.
Yeah, just a quick one. Smart meters seem to be very central to this operation of the smart grid and shifting and all kinds of other useful things, analysing people's energy use, all kinds of stuff. What percentage of houses are currently in this area, let's say Cambridgeshire, have smart meters today, and when will it reach 100%?
Coming off mute just to say, I don't have the answer mostly. I know that the rollout is about 70% of grid connections, as I understand it, the last time I checked. And that's across domestic and commercial, but it's not a stat I look up regularly, and I wouldn't stake my reputation on it, despite the fact I'm saying it publicly, with being recorded while saying it. But yeah, I think the amount is around 70%. However, it's not the be all and end all. So flexibility trading has now been enabled for devices that don't have a smart meter, that are internally metered. So it doesn't have to be the only thing we can do, but it really, really does help to understand how energy is being managed within a particular area. The other thing that smart meters don't do, and the thing that we need to consider, is what happens behind the meter. So everything that we do, the smart meter has very little visibility of until we pull energy in from the grid or push energy out to the grid. So if a customer of ours has a large battery that we've charged up, and then all of that energy is consumed within the household, there's been a huge amount of demand, but actually the grid has no idea it was there in the first place. So smart meter network, incredibly important, but yeah, not the only thing that's giving us important data about energy. And even if you are very against smart meters, which I know some people are, doesn't completely exclude you from the transition.
But I think Tom mentioned something really important there, which is about behind the meter. And this is what commercial businesses and home owners and groups of homes should be looking at, which is just how you manage those energy flows in your house, across your house, between your car, your solar PV, your heat pump. That's one thing that behind the meter you can do to help save money.
Yes, there's been a lot of talk about the smart meters being installed, but not much talk about how they would benefit us. The kind of National Grid hasn't, or energy companies haven't really controlled the narrative on this, which has allowed a number of people to come in and say, oh, they're going to take over our houses and turn off our fridges and stop us from watching TV. So there's little talk kind of about the advantages, but we're now starting to hear about what some of those advantages can be through the work that Tom's company is doing. And as a zero bills person, it has certainly helped me to enable that in my house through the management of my energy.
Yeah, go for it.
Just as a last point, I think there's a lot of people that are very nervous about smart meters and the fact the government can see the amount of energy consumed. And this isn't to scare anyone, but we don't consider the amount of data we're actually passing to other entities when we're using things like solar inverters. So you'll find people who very against smart meters, don't like smart meters, buy a solar inverter and send all of their data to China about all of their household consumption, even more information than you would with a smart meter. So in some ways, I have no problem with sending the data to China at the moment, but in some ways, the horse is already bolted. You're locking the door but leaving the window open. So yeah, it's an interesting narrative and an interesting thing that people are very resistant to, but I'm not sure why anymore.
And
Very
that's the energy market itself, the energy providers, they are, I mean, Octopus was the first to introduce an agile tariff which matches prices to half-hour periods through the day. A lot of the other energy providers are now introducing those time tariffs, and that is kind of where the future of the energy bills are heading. So, and smart meters are integral to that. It's one of those changes that is on its way.
Sorry, whilst we're having a go at smart meters, the other thing is that they're not actually, that none of the data on the smart meter is being stored by almost anyone unless you give them consent other than your energy company. Smart meters actually it's maintained by a company called Smart DCC. The storage is on the device itself. There's no big database of what you did last summer stored anywhere other than in the billing platform for your energy company. So yeah, there's no big brother who's watching necessarily with regards to those.
Amazing, thank you. I will move us on and I'm going to combine a few questions together. I'm sorry, I'm not reading it out precisely. And I was going to do a different thing, but I'm going to change it because I think we're touching on community energy here. So two questions, one specifically for you, Tom, is in the case of a community, I'll read this one out and there's another one coming. In the case of a community sharing scheme, how would you structure it? Where, for example, 50% of residents on the same street, the early adopters, choose to take part in year one, and then a further 25% of residents opt to join in year two. Would you incentivize early participation? ? And the related comment is community energy sharing is currently a summer opportunity, i.e. solar. What is the potential for winter?
Yeah, so I think just to the first point of would we incentivize early adopters, I have no idea. If you've got good ideas, then please send them in. The regulation is not even in yet. The business models aren't established. You need an energy supplier in order to initiate it. So we're kind of we're going to be slightly have our feet up to the fire by energy companies. But what it does do is actually, if you can go and link a whole bunch of people together, it creates a really interesting collective bargaining opportunity. Because if you can get all the folks on the street to agree to do this, or even the folks kind of in a community, or even a parish or local council with municipal buildings, whereas you've maybe been negotiating on an individual basis before, you've now got the ability to go to the energy company, and rather than just tell you which tariffs you can have, you can say, actually, we've now got 100 people and a huge amount of demand. What do you want to give us? So I think in that way, communities can kind of drive the business model themselves. As I've already mentioned Energy Local, and I really want to keep banging on about them because they're brilliant. And they were doing this, they did this before anyone else did. And also they championed P441, and I think we're a big part of promoting that and the reason it got approved. The models that they adopt are really interesting. So they look to identify an asset in a local community, secure an agreement with the asset owner and then with an energy company to create a two-tier tariff. So you get charged one rate whilst that asset is generating energy. Let's say it's solar panels on the roof of a shop. And when it's not generating energy, everyone pays a rate that has been agreed with the energy company. There are so many different models we could look to kind of deliver here. One that really excites me is how do we make households discoverable to one another within the constraints of GDPR and all of the other good data protection stuff. But if we've got folks on the street that have solar panels and batteries and EV chargers, and heat pumps are even harder to see because they're generally around the back of the house. I can tell if you've got solar panels and an EV charger. How do we help those folks identify opportunities to specifically create networks? We can go, right, you work from home all day, you bugger off to the office. Actually, there's a massive opportunity for you guys to trade energy at different times of day when you're not using it. That discoverability and the ability for us to identify opportunities for households is the thing that really interests me. I'll work out how to bill them for it later. There was a second one.
Opportunity in the winter compared to solar in the summer. Are there any?
Oh, yeah. Yes and no. So interestingly, different assets produce energy at different times of year. solar is great in the summer. Wind is actually really good in the winter if you've got more wind community assets, and actually that started to become more of a thing with regulation change like P441. That makes that a little bit simpler. So we've got more wind in the winter. The thing that I'm really excited about with community energy, which hopefully the council can help with at some point because we're not sure how to do this yet, is community batteries. And so we were also talking about a just transition. This is a really good way that we can ensure that a bunch of houses have access to this technology, not just one. If you can install a large battery and a single inverter, and you can effectively allocate a share in that battery to each household and say, right, okay, you guys have all got 10 kilowatt hours that we can reduce your energy bill on, then that's a huge opportunity. And it's very specifically a benefit in winter, because being able to store energy in a lot of ways pays back much faster than even being able to generate it if you're talking about household scale.
Any other speakers?
I think it's interesting that the work that Tom's talking about, I think of as flexibility services rather than community energy. So when I think about what government's currently trying to do around community shared ownership and community benefit contributions, so we're expecting to be able to deliver the level of electricity that we need over the next 20 years, that there will be more wind, so your onshore wind, offshore wind, more solar, and more batteries. Now, those have to land somewhere in communities. And one of the conversation that's happening at the moment is whether the government is going to mandate that large-scale developers, so Sudica or other developers with these 500 megawatt solar farms, whether there should be a mandated community shared ownership of that farm, so that the opportunity to have the revenue streams coming through to you and your community, and how you then want to use and invest that, is a really important thing. So that's a discussion which is happening right now. The community benefit side is that if you're a community that hosts an asset, there's a payment that comes through from that commercial developer into your communities that are hosting that scheme, so you can spend that on all your social and economic or environmental priorities in your area. So it could be that you want to spend that on biodiversity, on nature conservation, landscape scale change on that front. So if I could see someone was interested in that, that was a DESNZ, Department of Energy Security Net Zero working paper from May last year. I'm happy to give you the link if you want it.
Thank you. I don't know if the councillors want to mention the heat network here. You mentioned it earlier. This is a good moment.
I can do. So yes, the City Council is considering with stakeholders of putting in a central heat network in the centre of Cambridge, because we want the city to decarbonise, and a lot of it is historic buildings. So the idea is to use heat exchangers, whether it's boreholes or water heat exchangers, or even air source heat exchangers, and then create a network around the city, the historic city centre, and then the colleges can connect into that, and then that will enable them to use this new circuit of heat, and then they can turn off their gas. So this is a really big project that I think a lot of people were quite supportive of, but again, it will be disruptive. It's digging up roads and putting in this new form of heating, but the longer term means that these historic buildings will be able to hopefully decarbonise. And it's been going to scrutiny, has been considering it, and there's various experts who've been advising the city about whether it should do it but jointly with someone else. We can't. It's a big investment, long-term big investment, but quite exciting.
Wonderful, thank you. And we're coming close to the last question. So I'd just like to ask Nagar, who just wanted to talk about a quick workshop.
Thank you so much for this valuable conversation. that resilience stuff is producing and we are attending to. So I am Negar Shirazi, the researcher of Anglo-Ruskin University. I'm working on the CARES project, which stands for Citizen Action for Resilience and Ecological Sustainability. Tonight's discussion on energy dependency connects closely with our work because energy resilience is part of the bigger challenge of how communities adapt to climate change. The CARES project explores how communities in Cambridge and Felland region can strengthen resilience in the subjects around food resources, water, and local heritage. We are running a series of participatory workshops where communities can share their experience and help us to co-create, co-design the CARE digital platform, which stands for the Community Atlas for Resilience and Ecology. Our first online workshops is on 18th of March, and we still have a few places available in Cambridge Library. And if you're interested in this participatory or learning more, please come and speak with me after the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nagar. We have one final question, and I've saved this purposefully. It's from an anonymous online, which I think is a good one to end on before I pass back to Katie, is when can we expect energy prices to fall?
Okay, I think probably I'll start. I'm sure the others will look at this. So as I mentioned earlier, you've got a significant amount of investment to go in across the energy system, not just in generation of electricity, to get us off of that dependency of fossil fuels from abroad. But you've also got that investment into batteries, into pylons, into substations. So there's a significant level of investment that's still required. The problem with sort of saying energy bills are going to come down is that actually what happens is it's more about you're preventing them going up further faster. And that's a really difficult message to put across, that it's almost the saving that you're making, but you don't see in your pocket is the problem. And so I don't know if that helps answer the question, but the issue is you're probably not going to see it coming down, but it won't go up as quickly.
Thank you.
Kind of goes with the spark gap problem as well, in that the price of electricity is determined by the price of gas. We have our peak time of use for electricity between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. during the day. And that's generally when the grid will call on the gas generators to fill that last required amount of electricity generation. So if we can reduce the demand during that peak time between 4 and 7, then we'll have no reason to call on gas to be generating that last mile of electricity. And that would then bring the price down, because if all our electricity is being generated by renewable sources, which are far cheaper, gas is out of the equation, then that could bring the bills down. And to go back to the question about solar with kind of summer and winter, sorry, I wanted to chime in on that. That's where kind of retrofitting your house comes in for the individual householder. If you can reduce your energy demands through the winter and the summer from your heating and cooling bills, the first step that most houses will do is put solar panels on their house. It's a very simple measure. And if you then, in later years, retrofit your house so you're reducing the energy requirement, or the energy that's being generated by your solar panels will go even further to reducing your individual energy bills. And then you would be put in a position where you are getting closer to zero bills or further.
So thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Paul. Do you want the final word, and I'll pass back to Tom, and then we'll pass back to Katie.
Yeah, sure. So the cost of energy is going to decrease by about 30% in about 6 minutes. And tonight, there's a good half-hour period where it's completely free. And you can fill your boots for 30 minutes with as much electricity as you want. It's not magic. These are dynamic tariffs. So this is something that only octopus, actually have available. We were really hoping that another energy company was going to be able to make it through, but the way the grid works is every 30 minutes there's a price of electricity set. Dynamic tariffs enable consumers to access effectively that wholesale price plus a margin for your energy company. Through utilising dynamic tariffs and managing your own load, you can significantly reduce your costs. Also, if we are using cheaper energy, it's not universally true, but most of the time that is also renewables and lower carbon energy. So the more of that we use, the more we move away from the fossil sources, and the less expensive energy is going to become for all of us. If we can reduce that dependency during peak times, if we can all peak shave by cooking your dinner a little bit earlier or a little bit later, or running your dishwasher at the time when the carbon intensity is going to be lowest. And actually there's a little feature on our website that shows you when the carbon intensity is going to be lowest today on the grid. That's one thing that everyone can do right now to reduce their bills and look at tariffs like that. It does expose you to a significant amount of risk, especially right now where you've got like the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, where we can't move a lot of energy through right now. So energy prices are skyrocketing. So it's not necessarily for everyone all of the time. But for the vast majority of people, if you've got a small amount of load you can shift, if you can afford to buy one of those nice plug-in batteries, or if you can afford to install a small small actual battery and inverter that will pay back in less than 4 years, you can reduce your bills today.
Fantastic. Some good news, Tom. I can say that other energy companies are using time of use tariffs. They're not publicly available, but they're using them in the background in their trials and experiments for things like vehicle to grid and for heat pump tariffs. So they're all at it, but they're not doing it publicly yet.
Yeah, so dynamic changes every 30 minutes in line with the wholesale market. There's lots of time of use, and time of use is brilliant and a much easier way of people shifting demand as well, in a bit more of a secure way.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to have to call it there. Thank you, it's really helpful. Apologies to those who didn't get their questions answered on the line, particularly Brian. You've asked some great questions. Hopefully we've covered them in other people's answers. I would just like to say, if you would like to contribute your questions or input, remember that you can do so for the report that goes into a big document. So if you're interested in that, come chat to me or Katie. And with that, I will hand back to Katie. Thank you.
So we do have two more forums coming up, one on communications and one on communities. Please do come along to those. We got some more exhibition outside, but before we finish, it's been fantastically interesting presenters and Q&A. And we have Alison, who has been our special listener, is going to sum up in a couple of minutes for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I will try and sum up what's been a very rich discussion, and thank you once again to the presenters. I think we've been given a very good picture of the UK energy system and all its many complexities. So clearly the UK is going through a massive change as we're trying to shift to cleaner energy. It's a huge task. It's going to take a massive investment and take a lot of time. And many of those changes are going to be challenging and controversial, especially some of the new infrastructure. So I think, one point that I think worth highlighting is the need to think about ways in which those people who are most impacted can see some of the benefits. So whether that's through lower energy prices or other benefits. So there's a lot to be explored there, I think. We heard a lot, a lot about the importance of raising awareness and of education. And I think that's also an important means to ensure that as few people are left behind as is possible. And clearly there's a lot happening here in Cambridge, including thanks to the Cambridge Retrofit Hub and its other organisations involved. So they play a very important role in helping to support people to make the shift. And I think, yes, clearly one other issue that came up a number of times was there seems to be a lot of interest is in community energy. That's also a very important area where that can be a more equitable way for moving forward. And finally, of course, there's an important role for the council in continuing its work to reduce its demand for energy and in its role as planning and thinking about infrastructure and so forth. And I think also in supporting and trialing new approaches, including the city heat network that we heard about and possibly other community initiatives too. And I will leave it there.
Thank you very much, Alison. We'll just I thank the council for letting us use this chamber, which they're not charging for, so I really appreciate that. But just one last thanks to the three speakers. Thank you very much.
I'll just say one thing, which is you'll please come and chat outside. Don't disappear straight away and grab a chat with people. This event has been run on essentially a shoestring. If you're able to donate something, there's a little basket outside, or you can scan a QR code to cover our printing costs. You'll see the leaflets in front of you. There's more out there. Please take them into communities, put them in cafes, make sure people are aware so they can contribute to communications of communities. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for coming. Please, can you vacate to the balcony because we have to close up the room? Thank you.